And we're live. Welcome to you, the viewer. Welcome to our fantastic panel. It's the After Dram, and it means it's time to unwind. So put your feet up, grab a dram, and or a cocktail or two drams. Do whatever you want.
Whoops.
Just relax. Kent, Nick, and I've done a deep dive into the final of this book.
No, this is the first time for this.
I'm sorry.
Right here.
Well,
I'm back. Maybe. I hope I'm back. Hopefully you saw the book. And as a quick recap, we talked. And everything was fantastic and it's great. We're going to do a new introduction with what you have in your glasses. And let's do that. We're going to start with Andrew.
Okay, great to be with you, everybody. Here for the After Dram now, and I've still got the same dram I had before, the Four Oak. I don't have a huge selection where I'm based in France, but anyway, it's a good whiskey, and I'm enjoying it.
You've got something you like. As long as you are happy with it, we're happy with you. Perfect. Thank you very much. Dave, you're up.
all right, Andrew, you helped let me off the hook on this one. So it's Yukon Dave coming from the basement, as always. And today I've got something that's just outside of the island of Isla. And it's a new bottle I just got. It's a cask release at 58%. Unnamed, of course, for this show.
Okay.
So I'm enjoying this one.
Excellent. And it's another good size pour for you there, Dave. That's
Standard pour.
standard pour. You're up.
Hi, my name's Kent. I go by Whisky Island on pretty much all media platforms. It's a sad day. This is a bottle kill for me again. And there's really not too many of these left out there. It's a nice
Lovely looking bottle.
Oh, and she's so delicious.
So send that whiskey off in style. It is. It's good. Thank you, sir. Nick.
Hey everyone, it's Nick. I go by Black Hat Whiskey. I am still working on my Freud 15-year-olds, and that's what's in the glass this afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Sheila.
I am Sheila. I go by Anconi on all the platforms, and I am still double fisting a quarter cask and Lefroy 16 today.
And Drew.
And yeah, I'm Drew Semper, most of the ones. And I, as well, am continuing on with my quarter cask and leg 16 in the double fist.
Excellent. And it's probably a good thing that you didn't finish those in the first one, because that's a lot of whiskey for 12 o'clock in the afternoon. But it's 1 o'clock now, so we're doing well. Ladies and gentlemen, me. I'm drinking this. I had to pick something that I was pretty sure that Kent wasn't going to drink, because I didn't want to have the same thing as him again. So this is a blend, and it's a half decent blend. I'm enjoying it, and for the price point, probably about $60 Canadian. It's lovely. So, and the Isla Storm is fitting with the theme that we're thinking of. So that's why I picked that instead of one of my other blends. And because we are talking about shipwrecks, we're going to stay with that a little bit. And the question being, in reading this, so we were talking about Whiskey Galore in the book. So there's Whiskey Galore. That's the movie, if you haven't seen it. Nick's got the actual Whiskey Galore book, so that's an older one. And sorry, mine is Scotch on the Rocks, which tells the story of Whiskey Galore, so it's not Whiskey Galore. So we have the books that kind of surround the theme. And what's happening on Isla was with the Mary Ann, so that was the ship, and the ensuing weekend that they had. So I just wanted to have kind of, we read the chapter, we found out the debauchery, all this, the fights and the drinking and the deaths because of over drinking on the weekend. But let's put the deaths aside and act like that we're smarter than that. How many of you thought that they would have liked to have been part of that situation in that moment in time? Because I would have loved to have been there at that point, and I would have taken the whiskey and I would have drank the whiskey, but I probably would have put some away, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, how about you guys?
Well, I think we always want to be good, be part of kind of something that's interesting, exciting. Well, and at the time we probably didn't know what was going on. It just would have been fun to be there to, like I say, I've watched a lot of bar fights. I've never been in one.
It's probably a good idea. Just sit in the background and egg them on. You gonna take that?
They're interesting.
Okay.
The funny thing about that is you never know you're at an epic party until afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
And Nick, Drew, Sheila, you wouldn't have wanted to be in there?
No, maybe helping in the aftermath, but definitely not during the fights and the epic drinking.
Oh, it didn't have to be the fights. Forget the fights. Let's say no fights, no deaths because of over drinking, just the fun and the dancing and the camaraderie at that point in time.
Oh, I've been there for a bunch of those.
Okay, forget.
So then, yeah, maybe.
Let's not even talk about it. How about you, Drew? You would come, leave your lovely wife and come out with me that weekend with all the fighting around us, but we wouldn't be fighting, and the over drinking, but we would be better at.
Sounds fun.
Sounds fun. Thank you. I get a little bit of truth coming out. Nick, you're my last person. Yes, no?
I'd go with Sheila on this one, and I'm not much for the. Yeah, I know. I see Dolph the head going down. I don't want the fighting and whatnot. The party, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Well,
and Andrew. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say there's a passage in the book that I really like, and it's that must have been some fiery young spirit, because that's when the fighting starts. Because Andrew said in the book, he wrote that the better whiskey or the more aged whiskey just makes us sleepy and stupid, so we wouldn't have gotten into those fights. I just love that.
I think Andrew was talking about age as well. The young ones being the fighting ones, and the older, more mature ones getting sleepy. And which one would you have been, Andrew? Would you have been searching for the good whiskey, or would you have been indulging with the rest of the masses?
Well, I would like to have been there, because I would like to have been there for all the great historical moments on Isla, to have observed them. That would be so interesting. I'm not much of a fighter. You know, I'm not into that particularly. So, but I would love to have, roamed around on the beach looking for some nice bottles. Yeah, that would have been great.
I think that would have been a great experience. You guys, and I'm going to bring Sheila and Nick back into it. These are two people that love to search for the nice dusty bottles, searching for those bottles. Just picture yourself on the beach. Thousands of bottles mixed together, and you're looking for that fabulous bottle. I think you would have liked that moment at least. Yeah. Yes, I got Nick with that. And Sheila,
you're every one of the bottles.
Yeah. I got a comment out of Andrew. Didn't you say you were built like a playing card?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So he would say, you and me both. Like I'm pretty quick, so I like to watch it. And if it gets out of hand, I'm gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And then start drinking your whiskey. All right.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to Bessie. I've been waiting to ask this for a while, because I find her a really fascinating character, and you don't get a lot of information on her. So, but Andrew, you talked to individuals who knew Bessie Williamson of Lefroy, one of the most well-known historical characters in Isla's history, in maybe, let's say Isla in itself, not just distilling. Now, I'm convinced that I don't know enough about her, and I want to know more. So, panel, can you tell us what you found most interesting or surprising about this character? And then I'm going to finish this off with a question to Andrew about getting information. So, from you guys, interesting stuff about Bessie, or stuff you might already know that was not talked about here.
So Andrew talked about Ian from Lefroy and how open and he was, but his comment on that he had served under a lot of different managers. They were all good men, but they didn't last. What was it? 18 months was was the limit. When Bessie came in, because all the managers before would tell, You're going to do it my way. And that was the end of it. Bessie came in and said, well, these guys know what they're doing better than I do. And she let them run the distillery. She ran everything else. So I've had that personal experience in work where one guy was a taskmaster. The next guy came in and what he told me was make me look good at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And
All right.
I saw that. That was a piece of my history
Nice.
with Bessie.
Thank you. Anyone else information that you thought was neat, interesting?
I think Dave kind of hit it right on the head.
Mine was the section where Andrew was referring to her relationship, or we don't know if she had a relationship with the owner at the time. She had a relationship, obviously, but did she have a romantic relationship, and how people were alluding to that, and that's why she took over, or she inherited the distillery. So that part of it I didn't really think of, and I think I've heard it before, just inklings of it, but you brought that to life a little bit there, Andrew. And well, talking to the people, and you asked the head he was the head distiller, he's not the manager, right? What he thought?
Ian McLean.
Yeah, but
he was just a distillery worker, but he was an observer of the relationship
of the time.
Say.
And he
used to push Ian Hunt around in his wheelchair in the end. So you know, he was a key worker at the distillery throughout that whole period.
And he didn't want to say one way or another. I liked how he skirted the question as well.
I thought he was pretty cut and dry.
But his view was that there wasn't any sort of physical relationship for sure. They were different generations, and the sort of power structure between them was different, and you know, these were such different times. I mean, you mentioned you'd like to know more about Bessie Dolph, as we all would, but she was an enormously private and professional person, and she gave, you know, the whole idea of telling anybody anything about yourself as part of your professional activities was sort of completely unthinkable back then. It was such a different world, you know, pre-social media, pre-ego, you know, me first, I'm the star here. None of that. I mean, and to me, the most striking thing of all was, you know, finally having married this rather strange Canadian guy who hooked up, Wissett Campbell.
He doesn't represent Canadians very well, though, I don't think.
Maybe not.
That's okay. I had to say that.
But, you know, to refer to him not as her husband, or not even by his name, but, you know, just as somebody who had set up a gardening operation in this very formal, clipped manner in which she did it. It's just such a different world. Such a different world. So, you know, we approach it with our lenses of, you know, the early 21st century and, well, everything post 1960 and Me Too and, you know, whatever you want. I mean, all that stuff. But they were very formal, very reserved people living on a Hebridean island with fairly strict kind of religious sort of traditions around the place. And, you know, these things, you kept your feelings to yourself and you just got on with your job, and that was what you were meant to do. And end of story, really. You were there to serve the company and to serve the community, and service was all. It wasn't about your own personal ambitions, expressions. And probably that had negative consequences as well as positive ones. You know, it may come at some personal cost. Who knows? But we'll probably never know. We will never really know much more about Bessie, because I don't think there are any documents out there that are going to tell us. And those who knew her personally, like Ian McLean, have all died now.
And that was my question. Did you think there's enough information to actually make a whole book about her? Maybe there is enough to make a whole book, but where could you get the information? I think you answered that. Maybe the Canadian has some type of, I don't know, memoirs put out there somewhere. Maybe. Nick, if you could hold up the book by Fred Minnick, Whiskey Women. And so there's, and I'll ask you to kind of scan the inside. How much of that is devoted to, do you think, Bessie?
There's a couple pages, but she's come more to light here, I'd say, within the last year. Lefroy has even done more to highlight her role in the distillery in its own history. Like, there's been a huge movement in recognizing her work and what she brought to surviving the war, to her knowledge, to her savviness as a businesswoman.
Yeah, and they do a nice write-up on their homepage about that, about her. But they also, what's the whiskey that they devoted to her as well? There's a whiskey they just put out recently that we can't get. Sorry?
We did a 25-year-old in her memory.
Yeah, a 25-year-old.
And is it available at the distillery, or was this one that you had to get at the international airport thing? It was one of those two, and I can't remember.
It's at the distillery.
Okay. All right. So that's good. But we're not going to find out.
Dram Fine did a podcast here a couple months back, and they had dug into some history on it as well. And I think it was Pam who was able to get a little bit more history because she has family linked to them as on the island, so they were able to pull some more.
And Andrew, you probably haven't heard of her, but Pam has her grandfather worked at Bruichladdich, so she has a link to the distillery, and I like the way she remembers things. It being in a pub or being in the distillery seemed normal as a child. It didn't seem like she shouldn't be there. It was just part of her life. So she grew up in that kind of situation. So and she says the same thing. She doesn't know if that's good or bad, but that's the way it is, and that's how she remembers it. So maybe I'll look back. I have to look back in their podcast. And again, it's Dram Fine, and how do I find it? I think it's Facebook that I found the last week. But
they do podcasts, so any player that does podcasts, you can. Yeah, there you go.
So you're looking on the podcast. So my iTunes podcasts, what I'll find it on. Okay, because I only see their links when they show the links for that day on Facebook type thing. All right, sounds good, ladies and gentlemen. Any last comments about Bessie before we move on? No, because I'm going to talk about washbacks, which we could have the first week, because we talked about the three myths before that were kind of, Andrew was dispelling a little bit, or he's addressing it. And certain distillers are just, they don't think so, and other distillers, they do think so. And I think we decided that if it was beneficial to your product, that you believed in whatever you had to believe. But I've been holding on to this question since our very first week, and it's reappeared. So here's the chapter. Let's get this one. Sorry, let's get my banners up here and find, of course, a quote. Page 331. Boom. There we go. So Donald Rennick of Lagavulin told me that the wood gave the wash a pleasant lactic character, while Jim McEwen of Bruichladdich claimed that wooden washbacks mean the finished spirit has more floral notes. Ian Henderson laughed. I've run distilleries with both, and to be honest, I don't think it makes a blind bit of difference, except ours are much easier to clean. So panel, where do you stand on the fourth possible myth concerning wood washbacks? Do you agree with Percy and Ian or with Stuart Thompson and Bill Lumsden and Jim McEwen? So does it matter or does it not matter one way or another? Tell us what you think. Or tell us you don't care if you don't care to. That's fine too.
Everything changes what they're doing. I mean,
I thought
stainless steel is so clean and the wood so, like, it's just, there's got to be a difference.
Okay.
Or everything would be made out of the same material, and the line arms would be the same elevation, the grain would be the same. But what this book's taught us is that using the same grain and other processes, everything's different.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And Andrew, I'm going to come back to you in a minute after everyone's talked, but I'm going to go back to the washbacks being wood or metal, because that happens in wine a lot. Even though it's distilled afterwards, I'm still going to want to know from you if you think that there's a difference. The rest of you guys, what do you think?
I think the biggest difference is optics.
How pretty it looks in the distillery tour. Okay. Thank you, sir. Nick? Oh, Sheila, go ahead.
Well, I can let Nick go first if she's got.
No, I'm just
You go
picking
ahead.
up. So
Okay. I'm going to start this with the whole preface of my background's not in chemistry. So with that disclaimer way out of the way. I don't know enough. I think based on just the volume of the vessel, I don't think anything's actually going to touch the wood enough for it to really matter. And they don't stay in the washbacks long enough for anything to really get enough exposure to the wood. So
4 to 6 days or 3 to 6 days, you don't think that's enough, right?
I don't think that's enough. And I think that if anything was going to influence anything long enough, it would be the water over the wood in that stage. And since we've kind of already also heard, at least Henderson's opinion on whether or not the water influences anything, his opinion is also the water is a pile of poo. Or not that the water is a pile of poo, but like that there's no influence from the water. So if there's no influence from the water, which has, far more degrees of touch points in all phases of distillation than the washbacks do, I really don't think that whether or not it's wood or steel matters. So, and that's gonna be my opinion.
Go for it, Drew. Do you agree with your wife or not? Throw her under the bus, man.
Somewhat, yes, I agree with her. And other ones, no, because it's going to depend on. As soon because of the wood, you're not going to be able to clean it as clean as stainless steel. So you're always going to have that little bit of, be it bacteria, something from a previous. Whether that's going to be enough to taste, not a clue. For the water side of it, I'd sit there and say, it depends on what you're doing. If it's, I don't know, Brita filtered, triple distilled, whatever, it's pure water coming in, or you just happen to pipe it in from the reserve behind you, that's going to change something. I believe it has to. That, if you just pulled it out of the creek out front versus it's pure filtered water, it's got to taste different. I haven't tasted
water's not the question.
No, I know.
I just brought that in.
I know. But it's not a chemist, not in anything else, but I'm just, it has to have a slight difference. Whether it's enough that you can actually taste or find, I haven't the slightest clue.
I'll tell you about water in a bit, because I just brewed 2 beers. One was with the oxygenated water and one without. It's same mash bill, and we'll see how they both taste in 2 weeks if you ever come over to taste both. And we'll see without distillation if it makes a difference. So if it doesn't make a difference without distillation, we could probably guess it doesn't with distillation. Nick, you're up.
I'm sort of sitting in both camps. With wood, is Drew and Sheila, you can't clean it to the same extent that you can steel. You can't get it as clean.
Yeah.
So you're always going to have that contamination level. Is it enough to impact the next batch of liquid that's coming through? And to what extent? I don't know.
Okay.
It would be interesting to find out what that impact would be and to what level it then impacts the flavor profile. And are you then getting some of those esters, those oils, then impacting at distillation?
So I really like Sheila's comment. Does time matter?
Yeah.
So if time didn't matter, then we would put instead of doing wooden barrels, you can just throw it into a giant stainless steel tank. But we know time matters for aging, but does it sit long enough? I still like here we go again, the romantic idea of the wooden washbacks.
Me too.
And
Well, to sideline that a little bit, what are you guys thinking about some of these new distilleries that are saying we can chemically age this in a day?
Well, I can tell you, it tastes like walnut. Because we've tasted some of those chemically aged whiskeys, and they have a very distinct flavor profile to them that does not match other aged whiskeys.
And is it because you have a preconceived notion before trying it, or did you go in with an open mind?
Oh, we went in with a very open mind on those chemically.
We didn't know what we were doing.
But they did have a very distinct flavor profile to them.
Yeah.
And you couldn't miss it. It was like a walnut paste.
Okay.
But you can't call
when I try it, I'm gonna have to not have walnut in mind just to see if it's that, because I'll probably be swayed by that, but I'll try not.
We'll have to do a blind tasting on that.
Yes, we will.
But you can't call it an aged whiskey because it's chemically altered.
Right.
It hasn't aged.
They'll call it a brand new one. I don't know. Andrew,
Make up a new term.
settle this conundrum for us.
Well, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. Well, what I would say is that your panel has given it a very good workover.
Okay.
And I don't really have anything in particular to add to the very useful comments that we've had from everybody on the panel. What I would say is, in a way, the key to the question is, when you get new large-scale distilleries built, what will they go for? If they're still going for wooden washbacks, and we know that they're much harder work and they're much more expensive to maintain and so on, are they just doing it for cosmetics? I wouldn't think so. So if they're still, if new large-scale distilleries are still being built with wooden washbacks, then I think there probably is some sort of reason for having them. Be interesting to see. I mean, I was just looking at my book to see if I excavated the information as to whether Port Ellen, the original Port Ellen, had wooden washbacks or steel washbacks, and therefore, when it's rebuilt, will they duplicate the original wooden washbacks if they did, or will they go for steel? It'll be very interesting to see in that case what they go for.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that Lagavulin, at any rate, has wooden ones.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, you're going to say something, I think.
Well, one of the conversations in one of the past books we did was, the comment came out. It's too bad that most distilleries are run by accountants. So accountants would put steel in versus wood.
Mm-hmm.
They would.
Because it makes sense.
Yeah. So if a big new distillery shows up with wooden washbacks, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see that.
Look for that. We'll look for it. Why not? We hear about enough distilleries coming out. We'll look for it.
Yeah. And you did mention in your book that Diageo has a policy that their most visited distilleries do happen to have wooden washbacks in them because they want them to be visited, the tourist profiles. And I would anticipate that Port Ellen will be a high tourist visit distillery. So it may just get wooden washbacks just because of the tourist profile.
Optics.
Andrew also wrote about, and I can't remember, someone's going to have to help me. It was a stainless steel, but they had the wooden around the outside just for aesthetics. Who was that?
That was at Bowmore, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which that said something too, and I'm going to agree with Kent on that one.
People like wood. People like to look at wood.
But Andrew, let's go back to you, and I'm going to go to wine. So Australian wine, and I don't know if they're in concrete or it's wood, or no, it's not wood. It's stainless steel. But is there any that do wood as well in Australia? And can you tell the difference between any of the four?
Well, the whole issue of, I mean, first of all, with wine, we have to distinguish between fermentation vessels and maturation vessels, obviously.
Yeah. Fermentation is what I'm talking about.
Two different stories altogether. So fermentation vessels, yes, you find you find concrete, you find steel, and you find wood, and you also find fiberglass actually.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. But fiberglass is generally people who can't afford any of the others because it's kind of cheap and easy. But they all have their adherents. Steel is, and also I think much depends on the type of wine you want to make. If you want to make a very fresh, crisp, primary white wine, like a Sauvignon Blanc, for example, or a Chablis, steel is generally preferred to wood. Whereas if you're wanting to make a red wine for long aging, a serious red wine, generally the choices are either wood or concrete. They do have a difference. Concrete is often liked nowadays more and more, I would say, because of its thermic inertia, the fact that it heats up and cools down very slowly, which is thought to be ideal for wine, because wine needs to be warm to ferment. Well, all things, there aren't many cool fermentations around apart from certain beer styles. And obviously, a cool fermentation takes a long time, and that has other implications. I mean, if you go to Bordeaux, you'll find steel fermenters. Chateau Aubryon, among the first growth, for example, has steel fermenters. But you'll also find wooden fermenters. Chateau Mouton Rothschild amongst the first growths, and I think Lafite as well has wooden fermenters. And then other super prestigious operations choose concrete now. Cheval Blanc, for example, has concrete. So there really isn't a single answer. Each has its adherents. Everybody thinks that their choice is right.
But can you tell the difference when you taste something? If you did something blind, would you have the ability? No? Are there those out there that say they can, that you believe?
Well, I mean, if for example, you had a wine that had just been run off after fermentation in a single winery made from the same set of grapes, where you'd had, for experimental purposes, a wooden fermenter, a steel fermenter, and a concrete fermenter, then perhaps you could tell the difference. Perhaps. But I've never had the chance to do that experiment. And I'm not saying you would be able to tell the difference. And in any case, such differences as there were could still be attributable to other things. Because remember, for red wine fermentation, things are happening. All the color is in the skins, not in the juice. Juice is colorless. You need to get the color out of the skin. So you need to work the skins in some way. So many other things are happening. There are many other decisions going on as well, apart from the actual material that the fermenting vessel is made of. So, as usual, it's one of those super complex things, and we're probably not going to get to the bottom of it.
And we're still not there. That's okay. That's fine. But we're recognizing that we've attempted, and we have, and we're still going to attempt. And I'm going to throw another one out here. Here's a fifth one, the firing vessel. So there appears to be another mention here of coal-fired stills. So on page 333, McDougall from Lefroy states that the biggest change to their spirit came when they changed 2 steam coils, and the very pleasant smell that was there previously with coal changed. And page 118, I'm just going to say it instead of putting it up. You put on a fire, and this was at the very beginning, and I was surprised how much work it was, and I shouldn't have been. But you put on the fire, then it ran too fast. So you pulled off some of the fire, and you pulled some of the fire out and then threw some of the fire back on again, and then it would begin to go too fast again, so you pulled it back off. So it's really experimenting back and forth. Now, when we hear about coal firing stills, but any of you imagine on the panel what the process was? And we talked about this when we did Whiskey Japan and how they do it, and they're very precise at the action, even if it's cold, because they wanted the flavors. Now, what I remember from Whiskey Japan is that because of the coal firing, they had more crystallization, more of a caramelization of the liquid at the bottom. So do you think that going to coils would change the scent, first of all, to burnt toast? Because I thought that if you had, not coils, but if you had the coal running really hot, really cold, really hot, that you would get more of that burnt toast caramelization smell. So I was completely off when I saw that on page 118, what he was saying between the coal and the coils and the coal. And I'm wondering if anyone else kind of delved into that with me, because I was confused and I reread it.
I think a lot of it is with the coils, they're going to be able to generate a lot more even heat on it. Yeah. And you're going to see a lot finer range on it. Well, from Dr. Don Livermore, I mean, they're going to partial percentages of degrees to get different flavors. And you should be able to achieve that with your coil over the coal. Yeah. And that being said, somebody who's very experienced with running a still will know kind of how much coal they need to put in it to achieve the same temperature. So
And we talked about that with the Japanese whiskey distilleries, that they are very good at what they do, and their position within the organization is heightened because of their technical knowledge of
skill set.
Right?
Yeah. Humidity and temperature and a whole bunch of stuff can change slightly through. And to me, it'd be like if you're using a coal fire to heat the water for the pipe versus the pipes through versus a direct fired coal versus like there's many different variations of technology that you can use that is going to change your fire.
Okay. Did anyone picture what Percy was doing at Bullmore being that elaborate? Like when he described it, did you think
I assumed it was direct fire,
or it's like you believed him?
Yeah. I believed it was direct fire, and that's what I was picturing was you're trying to get a certain temperature out of a direct fire coal still.
Okay. Andrew, did you see anything in any of your travels ever with direct fire or coal? Nope. Okay.
No, I mean, my assumption is that was a more artisanal way of doing it. And it would have given you, as with most artisanal things, some fantastic results on some occasions and some pretty horrible results on others. Whereas, modern systems are more controlled and more consistent and more even, and probably overall better. But you wouldn't get the occasional sublimity that you get with the artisanal way of doing things.
Okay. And did we all agree, or were you surprised by him saying that it smelled like burnt toast with the steam, the coils, as opposed to the fire? Because I took it I thought it was going to be the opposite. Anyone else think the same thing? No? Maybe.
No.
All right.
It was a kind of throwaway remark. He may not have been thinking about the exact words he was using at the time he said it to me. So I wouldn't assume it too literally.
We'll do.
He might have put it another way on a different occasion.
Depends on the mood. I'm that type of person too. What I say in one mood is different from what I say when I'm in a different mood. I'm there. Okay. We're going to end this finally. The Terroir talk. We're going to finish it, and Andrew's going to be the last person to talk. I'm not. If you want to say something, do it before Andrew does. But Andrew's going to have the last word, and I am going to put a quote up here. So there's the quote, and if I could read it. So page 285. Andrew once again seems to defend the notion of terroir, which I like. So Lagavulin and Kalila are the two big exceptions to the general principle that Islay whiskey is aged on the island, and to the general belief that island aging has a profound influence on the quality of the spirit. This is Andrew talking. For me, this is a shame. No opportunity should be missed at any stage to reinforce that stamp of terroir, of placeness in the malts, and passing 16 or more years on Islay's damp, cold marine climate, with its undulating barometric pressure and its blustering westerlies, is a major opportunity. Page 286, I'm continuing. If the Scottish environment makes such a difference compared to that of England, Kentucky, or Cognac, then it's counterintuitive to argue that different locations within the large and wildly various geography of Scotland will have no influence at all. So does anyone else want to comment on that before Andrew finishes it for once and for all with us? And we've talked about it 3 times, and I'm sorry to kick the dead horse, but I keep liking the notion. So anyone else up there?
Yeah, I'll go first, and I go back to the bourbon guys, and when they tell you that in their rickhouses, there's a difference from the bottom row of barrels to the top row of barrels. So if you take that information, if you believe that, then you have to believe that aging on Islay or aging on Dura or Jura,
on the mainland, yep.
Yeah, there's got to be a change. It's all these subtle things add up, like a whole bunch of different things will add up to a different thing. And that's why I'm so excited, because I love this story. You tell me you got the wooden washbacks. Well, I'm looking for a change because it's a wooden washback. You tell me it's coal fired. Well, I'm looking, wow, this is cool. you tell me it's aged on the island 100%. I'm looking for a difference in the taste from something that's come from the mainland. So I'm searching.
Okay.
I'm looking for the answers to all this stuff.
And that's fantastic. And I think the best part of it is our adventure with it afterwards, even if it's not a thing. But
I think all this, like when I talk to groups about whiskey, I don't have to really know exactly what's going on because there's so many things happening. I said, well, over here they talk about this, over here they talk about that. You guys make the decision. And so I'm the bringer of information. I don't know the answers.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else before Andrew finishes it off?
I want to throw a little piece in here, and then I think we definitely need to hear from Drew and Sheila because they haven't been kicking this horse with us.
That's right.
Through this book, so they definitely need to have their say on this. I was reading this, and I started to think about the regionalization, the Speyside, the Isla, and going, you know what? So many of these casks go and sit in a warehouse in Glasgow.
Yeah, Lowland. It's all Lowland.
So, well, that regionalization, it really means nothing. Like, what the hell is it's a marketing term? And I really went down a rabbit hole with it. So I'm throwing it out there. I'm like, what does it all mean? Like, what does it mean? That's my piece. But yeah, Sheila and Drew, your turn.
Nick and I are on the same table. I think we're in the same wavelength. I think in some cases, maybe like in some distillations, you can argue it like a Kilchoman specific bottling run, farm to table. I took it from this field and I ran this specific bottling. Sure, you could make that argument. You can track that bottle, that run specifically from its field through its distillation into its specific warehousing. Maybe you can make that argument for that one specific run. But ultimately, somebody who is getting their maltings from Port Ellen from month to month is sourcing its barley from a wide swath all across Europe. They can't even tell you, well, they can tell you where they're sourcing it from, but they can't tell you that I'm getting it from France this month and I'm getting it from Holland next month and I've got it from Canada the month after that it's locally sourced, and I got it from Scotland and I got it from England. So the sense of terroir, it's not, it's not even coming from Scotland all the time. So yeah, it all came from Port Ellen, but that's not a commonality of place to give you that terroir element. They're not all housing it all in one island. Take Lechec. Lechec trucks everything to Deanston and then, stores it all in Deanston. So this sense that, you can track everything and have terroir in a bottle of whiskey, which is, distilled. It's not like wine where it's, from the ground up and maintained all within one winery. So I just don't buy terroir. I think it's marketing. And you might get it in an individual bottle, but you're certainly not going to get it on a distillery-wide level.
Yeah. Drew, do you agree with your wife?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, it's coming from the wineries and the background where I was a kid. Yeah, you've got a winery that it's come from this farm for the last 100 years, and you can track everything. Most of the whiskeys, it's an industry. Like it's a process as opposed to a lightly touched like a wine or even be getting some of the beers. Like you're just there's too much stuff going on.
Okay. And Kent, you're going to be our last one before Andrew finishes it. He's got the last word. If we like it or not.
I'm completely on board with Sheila. Yeah, I think in the whiskey world, it is, well, Dolph, it's the romantics of all of it.
I'm okay with
it. I can't see anything to back terroir in whiskey. Wine, beer, yes, not whiskey.
Thank you, sir. Andrew, the floor is yours. We're going to make you large so we don't even see the reactions from other people. You're it.
Okay, well, we've spoken quite a lot about this already, and I've written quite a lot about this, and I've written quite a lot about this recently. In fact, in the present edition of a magazine called Club Inologique, there is an article by me on this very subject. So I won't resume all of that. But let me just say, with my wine hat on, that remember that even in the wine world, terroir is never place alone. It's always work in a place. There's always the human element is an important part of terroir. Every definition of terroir in France and everywhere around the world will always include the human element, the local cultural traditions, as well as the actual print of place in the product. I'd also draw your attention to the fact that wine is made from grape juice, which goes through one transformation, fermentation, and that's it. Whereas whiskey is made from a seed, which goes through two transformations before it's even brewed into a beer, which then goes through another dramatic transformation of distillation, and then goes through a very, very long aging process. So there are many, many more stages involved in the whole whiskey creation enterprise. And of course, many of the key stages of that, as your panelists have quite correctly pointed out, can't really be assigned to terroir in any sensible way. All of that said, when people are buying a bottle of Islay whiskey, they are buying the idea of place. They are buying Islay. That is very, very precious and very central to every single purchase of Islay whiskey. You're giving it to me, and that's absolutely right. None of us ever drink a glass of Islay whiskey without thinking about Islay. So our experience of the place is a very important part of the pleasure we take in enjoying that spirit. And in that sense, I do think it's a shame that single malt expressions of Islay malts are not aged on the island. And I do think it would be good, ideal, if we could have at least not every single expression of single malt expression of Caol Ila or Lagavulin aged on the island, because I understand there are compelling arguments not to do that, to do with despoilation of the island with warehouses and so on. And in any case, if you think about Lagavulin, where the hell would they put colossal amounts of warehousing? They've got the hill right behind them. There's no way you can go up onto the hill to do it. They've got the sea in front of them. They're squashed in. They can't create warehousing around the distillery itself, although there are other places on the island you could create warehousing. But I do feel that every single Islay malt really ought to, somewhere in the range, have an expression that was 100% Islay aged, as well as the standard malt expression, which could be aged off the island. I think that would be a very, very nice sort of additional tier to provide. And I do think that, when I sip and have a dram, of Lagavulin or Caol Ila, it would be lovely also to be able to say, well, this one really was aged throughout its entire life on the island. Because having been to the island often, Nick's been there, Sheila and Drew have been there, anybody who's been there will remember that the atmospheric conditions are very, very different there. If you've been there in a storm, you'll never forget it. The rain comes sideways. You end up with seaweed in the gutters. This is special atmospheric conditions. So to pass 10 or 15 years aging on the island in those conditions, I think is a lovely plus for the malt itself. And I would certainly be prepared to pay, another 10, 15 bucks over and above the standard price in order to be able to buy that part of the experience too. So I think if they're not doing that at the moment, they're kind of missing a trick. And, I like to think that eventually every single Islay malt would be available somewhere or another in a purely Islay aged form, as well as all the other forms. It's still not a produit de terroir in the French sense. It's still not a pure terroir product, but you're coming a bit closer to that ideal in that way.
Thank you, kind sir. And I wanted to add with Valerie, and she's been on the panel with us, and I like this question a lot, really, because I didn't think of it in these terms. So I'll read it out loud, even though everyone can see it. I've got a bottle of Ardbeg Galileo, which apparently spent time in outer space. It was a big deal. So how come we, as consumers, forgive that novelty, but question why Islay whiskeys aren't aged on Islay? So I'm just going to throw that out there. We don't have to really address it, but it's because I said Andrew was going to have the last word, and I think we're going to leave it at that. I'm just going to throw that out for future consideration. But thank you, Andrew, and I like the thing, and I know I put my little comment on there right there, but you still had the last word, so it's food for thought. Thank you, Val. I appreciate that, and we're going to go to our second last question of the night. So Andrew brings up a good point that we rarely see in books: the effect of alcohol on the immediate population. So the alcoholism, domestic violence, loss of the young adults to the mainland. This all speaks to the real world problems that Islay faces. So Andrew wants us to see the real Islay, warts and all. And I agree with that. I love it. It's fantastic. But the Islay seemed to hold a place in his heart, as demonstrated by, and it's this quote, and I don't have it up here, I'm going to read it. The world is thirsty for Islay malt, but in truth, it's even more accurately in need of Islay spirit. That, in other words, which is gentle, that which is quiet, that which is observant, that which is unranxious, despite the long history of dispossession, that which is tenacious. So I just wanted to end with that, and your opinion on that, Andrew. I think that should be the last thought for this book, and your opinion of the people that are there. And is there something else you want to add to that before my very, very last question?
No, that is absolutely what I wrote at the time. It's what I felt at the time. It's still what I feel. If I have a kind of litmus test for human excellence, the Islay way of being is a part of that test.
Nice.
Facing adversity, quiet stoicism, looking after other people, thinking always of the community interest, stepping up when you need to step up, not making a song and dance about it, not blowing your own trumpet, not screaming and shouting and arguing and fighting, watching nature, working with nature. All of those things are part of that Islay spirit for me. And to me, that they're still very much kind of the ideal way to live your life, really. When I think about that, it's very much part of that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for this. So one last question. This hopefully, after doing this with us and bringing you back into the whiskey world these past 4 weeks, I'm wondering if we've convinced you to maybe write another book or another something that we would all love to read, because we want to read another book from you. We would love to have you on again talking about whiskey. So is there any inklings? The tentacles of whiskey kind of eke into the subconscious a little bit, Andrew?
Well, as I said in the first program, the thing I've enjoyed most in my career, well, two things. One has been doing radio work, actually, which I did a lot of earlier on in my career. And then the other thing has been writing books. So I would love to have written more books. I would love to be able to write more books. The problem is that, you have a family to raise and you have to earn income. And unfortunately, books don't make terribly much money.
Okay.
Unless you're doing a different kind of book. These rather specialist, heavily researched books don't necessarily make much money. And I don't have any kind of salaried position as academics would, for example, to give you the time and resources to do that. All of that said, yes, I would love to write. I'd love to write another book. I'd love to write more about whiskey. So let's see if life shuffles itself around to make that happen. I am COVID and the being locked down has given me some time to start a new book, place, alcoholic beverage and place would be an important part of that book. Okay. So if I get the chance to finish that, maybe we can get together again and talk about it then in an even wider and broader sense than this time. Excellent.
We would love that. So panel, we're going to have our last comments, and we'll go in the same order we did originally. So Dave, you're going to start us off. So last comments, and Andrew, you'll finish us off if we can. Go ahead, bud.
Oh, you're talking to me?
Yeah, you're.
Yeah, I think the whiskey's taken over here, but
You've had like 4 ounces. You're
yeah,
good.
I've had a couple of refills. This book's really got me thinking, which is a dangerous thing. I came up. I have a quote, and I don't have it, so I can't come up with it on the thing like Dolph does. But after Dirty Harry shot this guy, he said, "A man needs to know his limitations." And after reading so many passages here, I've got to read one. It says, the Mirandering tarmac is the only contact Bunnahabhain had with the human world of books, butter, and nail varnish remover. I thought, what the hell? Nail varnish remover?
What are you talking about?
Well, I'm just reading something that Andrew wrote. It says, all goods and all human souls pass up and down it. I'm thinking to myself, if I wrote this book, it'd be, I drove on the one-way road to Bunnahabhain and back. Like you've added color and dimension to this book like nobody else has for me. So yeah, I know my limitations, and I'll be buying more books. I won't be writing any books. So thank you, Andrew.
And hold up that book again, Dave, because a lot of us use these ones. I think it's funny. I love your sticky notes. They protrude more than anyone else on the group. If you look at Nick's and Sheila's and Kent's, they're all very neat, and you and I, just big ones. Oh no, Kent's a little bit less, but they have the little ones. But yours are like.
But I think that speaks to our personality.
Yes,
there's something interesting, and I just jam something in there so that I can remember it.
Receipts and leather.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to just. I've got a couple other ones, but yeah, I won't take up too much more of the time. Go ahead. We'll go with the rest of the guys and ladies.
Thanks, Dave. It's perfect, man. Kent, you're up.
Yeah, actually, I probably have the least amount of tags in mine because I've been reading it on my tablet. So I've been color coding them in my tablet because I'm sorry, that font is way too small for me to read at night. It's kind of, yeah, it's a bitch getting old.
Thank you. And the tablet makes it bigger for you. So yes, for our eyes, it's all nice.
Size. And it gives me options for multicoloring as I go through too. And then I can search my tags that way. So it's kind of neat. But and you know, well, I mean, we still did chapter tags and then local tags. Anyways, Andrew, this, I don't want to put down any of our other authors by no means. They've all been awesome books, but we keep hitting a higher platform. And you are right now kind of, well, you're going up here. This, I have probably about 60 tabs on my computer of stuff that I need to go and read from just spin-offs of your book.
All the rabbit holes.
Yeah, rabbit hole. Okay. Reading about the shipwrecks, you know, I've got 2 books on orders just for shipwrecks, and you've alluded to them in your book. So read the book, you'll figure out where they are. It was kind of interesting to find there was about 22,000 shipwrecks around the island that they've counted. I'm like, how do you count that many? You know, you've alluded to the fact that there may have been a shipwreck there because they found cannons and gold and stuff, but don't know where the ship was. Did they dump cargo in a storm? Who knows, right? And these are like, now I got to try and figure out where that came from, where that went to. It's like, yeah.
There's not only that, the people can't go down and search the island because you can't have the divers go down in such heavy or quick waters either, right? So it's too treacherous for them. So there's tons of it that's not even checked out yet.
Well, so, I've done dives in 11 knot currents. It's an interesting dive. You plan your dive. Anyways, there is a couple dive teams and a few divers have died trying to get down to these ships too. And that makes me very curious as well, because now I've got to figure out how I can get on one of these expeditions, because I love to dive. I've done some interesting dives around the world, and this may just be chalked up to the next one. It's very technical. So, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Nick, Alice in Wonderland, rabbit holes for you. What are you happy with? What do you like?
Well, this has pushed me back to my bookshelf, and I've pulled books today. Like I've got to go back to my Alfred Bernard. I've got to go back to my Whiskey Galore and Whiskey Women and all these other books that Andrew alludes to, and it's like, oh, I've got to go here and there. And as Ken says, you push us as the reader further and further, and it's almost that demand that we understand more of what we're reading and appreciate more of the island that is beyond the whiskey. It's not just the spirit in the glass, because it's beyond that. It's the people, it's the history, it's everything that makes up Isla. And having been there, it adds that other dimension. I go back to my pictures and I go back to the memories of being there, and I'm like, oh, that wasn't enough time. And I think someone else said, it's like, yeah, a week's not enough. A month, maybe a month, maybe closer to 6 weeks.
A whole
But yeah, no, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Maybe you're like that. You go for a tour and never come back.
Could happen.
Andrew.
Yeah. So I'm thinking you need to talk to Minnick and Buxton about some extra royalties from all the people that are going to have to go buy their books in order to get through your book. And I only just don't say Bernard because he's long past, so you can't go after him for any extra royalties anymore. Just because they're going to get book sales out of this. Or I would expect them to, just because you have to read their books after reading yours, or at least to get through yours sometimes on the rabbit holes. I have to say, one of my favorite things about the books, other than it reminds me of other communities as well, is the glossary in your book is so phenomenal. It's not an introduction to a whiskey book, but this is probably one of the best put together introductory glossaries I've ever encountered.
Yeah.
And
she's doing her doctorate right now, so she's
like
thinking
amazing
about that.
glossary in the back of this book.
Yeah. It's
Also, the pronunciation guide is really handy for people who haven't
Yeah.
figured out how to pronounce places.
And Valerie said that a couple times. She loves the phonetics, so it helps us with how to pronounce things. So it's great. And I agree. There's page and pages and pages before the bibliography. Drew, you're up.
I just want to thank Andrew. Book was amazing. I've really enjoyed watching the last 3 weeks and participating in this week. So, thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Andrew. You'll finish us off.
Great. Well, it's been a great privilege for me to do these 4 weeks, really, truly, because, you know, I wrote the book and then life changed and other stuff happened and I had to go away from whiskey, and I've, you know, haven't been back and I haven't had a chance to really explore it in any depth. Well, to some extent, when we revised the book and corrected errors and things for the new publication as Whisky Island from Peat, Smoke and Spirit, that took me back to it. But this has really taken me back to it in a much more intimate and extensive way. And yeah, I've really enjoyed the experience. And to hear that, you know, it's meant so much to you, that means a lot to me as well. So I'm really happy that connection, that circle has been made. And what can I say? You know, we're in COVID. We're trying to get out of it. Nobody can go anywhere. But soon, we will be able to go somewhere. So all I would say to finish is that for those of you who haven't been, try to make this a top priority for your future journeying and voyages, because that will really complete the experience. Until you've been there, it's a dream. And once you've been there, it's reality as well. So I would urge you all to do that if you can.
So I think that we need to make you an Isla Colonel.
That's the lucky one, the Isla. Keeper of the Quake, Colonel.
That's something from a different book, but yeah.
All right. That's
Anyway,
it. That's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a fantastic and another fantastic afternoon. Thank you to the listeners. Thank you to the panel. Dave, Drew, Sheila, Kent, Nick. It's been an absolute pleasure spending this time with you guys. And a special thanks to Andrew for being with us in the past month and possibly convincing my wife that we should go to Isla. So thank you very much. It's been an experience that I will never forget. So here's the good company. Here's good whiskey. Here's the good books. And here's the book right here. There's the good book we're talking about. And here's the good conversation. You can see the panel around me that helped with that. And the people on the side today, thank you very much. And here's to seeing you all in 2 weeks, Saturday, May 8th, for 2021, at our new time. It's going to be 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I believe, for our Whiskey Book Club's 11th book review, A Glass Apart with author Finan O'Connor. So, as a final note, if you don't want to miss the future stuff, click like, subscribe, and we're going to see you all then. So thank you all very much and have a fantastic Saturday afternoon and night.